Have you ever heard stories of how students are scoring so well on their practice tests and then they completely bomb the SAT? In this video, I'm going to break it down for you and let you know how to avoid crash and burn. First thing that people do, they screw up their pacing. And here's what the pacing comes down to. Number one, you aim for perfection. That means that you feel like you have to be perfect. This test feels so important that suddenly you're spending a little bit more time on all these questions because it feels like game day and you're like, oh, I have to be really good today, right? And then when you dwell too long on them, you realize that your pacing's off and then you start to feel rushed. And when you start to feel rushed, what happens is you start to substitute in methods of approaching the test that are not what you learned. For example, I teach my students on our online course, or that I privately tutor, things like isolate the answer choices, find the differences between answer choices, plug in, vocab and context. You don't have time to do those suddenly, or you think you don't have time, even if you do. You throw all those methods out and then you start cobbling by with really bad methodology, with just like gut reactions, fast thinking all over the place, and it just turns into a disaster. You cannot fast think the SAT, by the way. And if all of those like tips and tricks that I was talking about sound like some foreign language to you, and you want to learn more about them, we have an online course for the SAT. I've helped coach students to perfect scores on the test. I've wrapped all my information that I know about the test into that online course. You can find it at SupertutorTV.com. We also have a free trial if you want to try it out for free. So let's talk about how to fix this. Don't aim for perfect. One of the things that I have my students do is tell themselves before they walk in on test day what their goal is. And their goal is not to get a perfect score, even if they want a perfect score. I tell them, okay, let's aim for a 1550. Let's try not to get everything right. And what I do is I have them sort of strategically figure out, okay, how many questions can I miss on the reading? If you need a 1550, that means maybe you can miss 4 on the reading, 1 on the writing, okay? Or 3 on the reading, 2 on the writing, or whatever it is. So then I want you to plan to get 3 wrong or 5 wrong. So when you get to a really tough question on the reading section, you suddenly can say, yay, I found 1 of the 4 questions I'm going to choose to miss. Cool. And then you let it go and you don't worry about it too much. You don't spend too much time on it. You keep moving. And as you keep moving, guess what? You're going to keep control of the situation. You're going to feel more in control of the situation. The panic won't set in. You won't then feel rushed. And then you don't have this cascade of horrible events with the rushing, right? And you won't abandon all of those wonderful tips and tricks and strategies that you learned from me or from someone else on the internet. The other thing that I like to do is I finish first and I deal with messy questions later. So again, keeping on this, I don't want to get to the end in a panic state. I'm going to let things go as I go. Even if I'm not like planning to miss them, I'm going to plan to deal with them later, right? Especially in the math section. I find that this is helpful. If I find a really hard math question on the no calc section, I do not stay put. I keep moving. I get all the way to the end. Then I come back to it. Similar, but a little bit of a different idea is that I always try to do shortcuts on the math section first, and then I try to do it the right way or the double check way second. So for example, I might have a question and I can see that the answer choices are ordered pairs of X's and Y's. All of the Y's are the same. I'm just going to solve for X. I'm not going to plug back in and find that Y yet. Even though when I do math at school, that's what I do. I find both. I'm just going to find the X. I'm going to shortcut it. Looking down at the answer choices is one fast way you can do that. The next thing that I do is I do reading passages in an optimized order. For me, what that typically means is I push the history to the end because I tend to spend too much time on the history. And again, I'm fighting for perfect, and I can like spend forever rereading. I want to avoid that, so I do that last. And then the other thing is I never do chart and graph questions last or science last, because science usually takes focus and calmness to line up all those details. And it's not hard, but if I'm in a state of panic, man, do I fall apart on science. So that's me personally. You have to figure out what works for you. But think about doing the passages in an order where, like, what can you do best if you're panicked, right? Put that last. And what do you do worst when you're panicked? Put that first, and then that can help you mitigate this bombing scenario, so to speak. Next, know where to go when time is short. If you do get to a passage late and you're like really running out of time, and you know, maybe you don't have time to read the passage at all. Maybe you only have 2 minutes. You got 10 questions left. Where do you go first? Vocab and context are always the easiest to do without reading anything at all. Second, evidence questions can take the most time because you have to look up so much detail. So even if you haven't read yet, those evidence questions could be super time consuming. Skip those for sure. And then 3, in the math, I usually avoid lengthy word problems. So if you see a type of question that's a big word problem, you know it's going to take forever. Skip it, finish the test again, come back to it. Last 2 tips: 1, bring your own watch. Don't go by the clock on the wall. And finally, write down markers and pacing points. And I know I talk about this in a lot of my other cram videos, so check those out for more information on how to create little pacing notes for yourself. We'll put a thumb here. Go check out that video if you want more tips on that. Second reason that people totally bomb the SAT is they're not as prepared as they think. I once read a statistic that like American students are more confident in mathematics than students in any other country in the world, but their test scores in math are not nearly the highest in the world. So overconfidence is real. Just because you ace one practice test doesn't mean you've covered 100% of the test content. And a few things to note in particular on the SAT. The first thing is geometry. Geometry only occurs a little bit on each test. But what that means is geometry is a really broad subject matter. And when that random question comes up, it didn't come up on any practice test, and then suddenly you're blindsided. You take way too long in it, even though you know how to do it, but it's been a while, right? And there you go, into the pit of destruction. Grammar rules, same thing. You know, some of these rules only show up every 10 tests. The super comma, semicolon, comparisons, commas, dashes, colons. A lot of you guys don't know every single way to use these. And then the final thing is that reading passages can really vary. Some of you guys might be able to do really well if your practice test has all modern passages, but come to a really tough history passage, maybe you fall apart. So what's the remedy for these? First, make sure that you're versed in all sections and all rules. I know I always say real practice tests are the best way to prep for this thing, but if you really want your best score possible, you might also want to get other resources, meaning books or courses or tutoring or whatever it is, so that you make sure you learn every grammar rule. You are proficient and polished in every math type of problem. The third reason that students completely bomb the SAT is that they panic. Test anxiety is super real. A few test anxiety tips for you guys. Number one, what I always say is I tell students to plan to take the test multiple times. If you're planning to take it multiple times, it takes some of the pressure off. This isn't the only test that you're going to take. You have multiple chances to get a great score. Two, understand that test optional is an option. There's lots of colleges you can get into without a test. It's not the end of the world. If you bomb, just knowing that hopefully will help you relax. And three, take the ACT for fun. If you're studying for the SAT, I sometimes recommend that students also prep for the ACT. I had a student who emailed me this morning. He said he only did our online SAT course, and he managed to score not only in the 99th percentile on the SAT, but a 35 on his ACT. Sometimes you can walk in, just take that test as an extra lottery ticket, not care about it at all. And because you're relaxed, you can get rid of that test anxiety. That's all I've got for today, you guys. I hope you found this insightful and helpful. So if you need to review any of this, we've got a blog that goes with this video. We have 2 courses online. We've got an SAT online course and ACT online course. I've prepped students to perfect scores on both of these tests, and I've wrapped all of my knowledge into these courses. I hope you'll check them out. I'm doing a lot of pop-up classes right now. If you want to be in the know of what pop-up classes we're going to have, I have super seminars, which are like for super high scorers on the SAT. We're also going to be doing like a PSAT super seminar before the PSAT. If you want to know more about those, be sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube, because we'll push that on our YouTube, as well as to our mailing list, SupertutorTV.com/subscribe. That's the best way to keep in the know of what seminars and pop-up classes we have going on. I also coach essays. My background is being a storyteller and a filmmaker, in addition to being a test prep coach. So storytelling is like my jam, and I help students craft their essays for college to get into places like Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, and Yale. I would love to help you with your essays. We have group classes going on. You can find out more about those at SupertutorTV.com/essay. Thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck on your SAT. I hope you crush it and don't bomb it. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching.